So, Michael, let me say this to you about this quarterback competition in New Orleans before we bring in Charles Robinson in a couple of minutes. There are starting quarterbacks and there are franchise quarterbacks. The Saints obviously had a franchise quarterback for a long time. He now works with us at NBC. Jameis Winston, once upon a time, was selected out of Florida State as the Heisman Trophy winner, as the number 1 overall pick, to be the Bucs franchise quarterback. He is now vying for the opportunity to succeed Drew Brees as the Saints starting quarterback, not necessarily franchise quarterback. This is going to sound ridiculous. And it's like, well, Michael Smith's saying it, so what else is new? But like, this is going to be a stretch even for me. It's going to be a stretch even for me because it goes against all conventional wisdom and everything we think we know about football. This is just my gut talking. I told you about my spidey sense earlier in the show about Deshaun Watson. This is just what? Wait, what I said? You swallow spit or you laughing for real?
Go ahead.
Or it just went down the wrong pipe?
No.
Just went down the wrong pipe?
I got choked up. I really got choked up for real.
Oh, you okay? You good?
I'm good. Got some water over here.
Yeah. And ooh. I don't know if anybody gets these references. If they don't, too bad.
That's a great reference. That is brilliant. That's brilliant.
And oh man, rest in peace. I don't even want to use the word because rest in peace with Jamie Foxx, man.
Go ahead.
Anyway, what was I saying?
She said,
this is a stretch even for me. This is rocks and blunts, ribs and barbecue. This is a stretch even for me. Okay, it's a stretch for me because it goes against everything that we think we know about football. Because the old adage is, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. My theory is, my prediction for this season is that Sean Payton, Mr. Super Bowl onside kick himself, who never met a substitution he didn't like, Sean Payton will be the first credible coach. I ain't talking about Steve Spurrier, but the first credible coach, okay, the first accomplished coach to put that adage to the test. Because I believe in Sean Payton's mind, if I have 2 quarterbacks, it means I have 2 quarterbacks. I don't assume anything when it comes to Sean Payton, least of all that he will abide by conventional wisdom. Sean Payton, mind you, last year everybody assumed that Drew Brees would be the starter, and then he went to Taysom Hill. Now, what he should do is start Jameis Winston so that Taysom Hill can continue to be the Swiss Army knife. But as we bring in Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports, who's standing by to correct me, Charles Robinson, I believe that what you'll see throughout the season is extensive appearances, package, feature roles for Taysom Hill, maybe even some starts, maybe even some surprise starts here and there. But I believe that Sean Payton is going to come as close as anybody has to operating with 2 quarterbacks. He may even treat the quarterback position like running backs and ride the hot hand at certain points. But I'm just not convinced that Taysom Hill, who we know he loves, is only going to be a backup who runs some specialty package every now and then. I think he's going to try to run both of them out there this year because he already knows what he has in Jameis, and we know he loves Taysom Hill. What do you think, Charles?
Well, he had a Hall of Famer in Drew Brees, and look how much he used Taysom Hill, okay? Like, he had one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and he still is obsessed with getting Taysom Hill on the field. So why would that change with Jameis Winston? I would say in terms of how extensive this gets, it's going to be on Jameis to affect that. If Jameis comes out the way that he did last night, if that's the real Jameis Winston, if he's figured out how to cut down on some of the mistakes. Look, I don't think anyone's ever looked at Jameis Winston and said, this is a guy who doesn't have talent. He was the number 1 pick in the draft. We all knew he had talent. There was no question the arm talent was there. There was no question that at Florida State, his teammates rallied around him. That was never part of the equation here. It was just that Jameis Winston couldn't get out of his own way. And so the question is going to be, has spending time with Sean Payton, spending time in the quarterback room with Drew Brees and Taysom Hill, has that helped Jameis get to a point in his career where he can not make the mistakes that were compounding themselves under Bruce Arians that last year in Tampa Bay? So if Jameis gets out there and he lights it up, I think Sean Payton's going to ride that hot hand, and he'll figure out how to use Taysom in packages and maybe even at a higher percentage.
So you don't see co-quarterbacks. Like I'm basically describing co-quarterbacks. You don't see co-quarterbacks for somebody like Sean Payton who will buck the trend, buck the conventional wisdom.
I don't. I think. Are there two? Is he looking at as a situation where he has co-quarterbacks at the moment? Yeah, he clearly is because he hasn't named a starter. Okay, like if one of these guys just had absolutely run away with it, we would have that decision by now, right? And that hasn't happened. So. In terms of could Taysom Hill get a spot start, something to throw a wrench at teams, I guarantee you Sean Payton's going to give that idea to teams during the course of practice weeks, and he's going to make sure that he mixes and matches enough during the course of the season that it gives opposing defenses, they're sitting there going, okay, well, we have to prepare for two types of quarterbacks. I mean, because they're not the same kind of quarterback. They're different quarterbacks. And that's not an easy thing for defenses to prepare for because you have to have a specific mindset and package for Taysom Hill and what he brings to the table, and a whole other specific mindset and package when Jameis Winston's out there, and then when they're both out there. You have in a way you have three different advantages that you have to prepare for because there probably are going to be times where, and I guess this leans into your co-quarterback thesis. That both of these guys are going to be on the field, and it won't always be Jameis taking the snap.
Now, I'm not necessarily going co-quarterbacks, fellas, but I just want to point this out. We know that Belichick Brady is the more celebrated coach-quarterback duo, but Peyton Breeze, that thing was together for a long time. And just, Charles, could you just comment on the weirdness of knowing that Drew Brees is not going to be there. Like we've seen the Saints without Drew Brees. We saw it last year. He was out for 4 or 5 games, whatever. But to know that he's gone after the first time since 2006? Yeah. It's just strange to me. I don't know. Like, was it weird to you just to know that there's no Brees on this team?
It's weird, but in a way it's exciting because I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to see a more distilled Sean Payton offense than you ever have before. And I think people know this. I don't mind saying it. Drew Brees changed a lot of stuff at the line of scrimmage that Sean Payton would send it. Okay. Like it was, there were a lot of passing plays that probably would have been running plays if they had gone in as designed under, what Sean Payton thought of the game flow, where it was going. Go back and if you were to go back and look at those games where Brees was, ratcheting it up 50 times, when he's throwing 50 times a game, I guarantee if Sean Payton was being honest with you, that number would have been markedly lower if maybe things were run the way that Sean set them in. But, Sean also knows he had the rare quarterback that had the ability to check out of a run play and turn it into what he wanted, given what the defense was offering him. I think you're going to see Jameis and Taysom Hill are going to run what Sean Payton is ultimately plugging out there, and this year in particular. So it's weird, but it's also I'm curious to see what this offense looks like and know that probably 90 to 95% of what we see run is what Sean Payton's calling into the game.
One more thing before we move on from this game. From one quarterback competition to some would say a contrived quarterback competition. Their counterparts in Jacksonville, Gardner Minshew, Trevor Lawrence. I think I gave more credence to the idea of a competition there than I think you did, Michael. Would love to know what you're hearing about Trevor Lawrence's readiness. We know how pro ready he was coming out of Clemson, but how ready is he for week one, especially vis-a-vis Gardner Minshew? And also maybe if you could tie that in, I'm going to ask you a lot here, Charles, if you could maybe kind of just tie that in with the state of the franchise under rookie NFL coach Urban Meyer, who today lost his second first-round pick, Travis Etienne, to a season-ending foot injury.
Yeah, I mean, the Etienne foot injury ending the season, I mean, that's rough because, I mean, that takes away a pretty considerable piece of talent that they were going to have on the board, and I think they were really going to lean on this season. I think when you look at Lawrence and you look at Minshew, you can see the disparity in experience between the two players. I mean, Minshew's got a lot of starts in a short period of time in the NFL. He's had decent success. As you said, there are starting quarterbacks in the league. I would say there's starting quarterbacks and there are starring quarterbacks. I think he's a starting caliber quarterback in the league. Do I think that's in the top 15? No, I don't. But what was interesting to me was I was texting with a guy last night in the league, and he was watching the game. And he said to me, there are throws, and he says, he basically said the media, he was like, you guys are going to miss this, but there are throws and things that Trevor Lawrence is doing on the field right now that because they're not completions, you're not going to understand how great of a throw that was, or how great, just there's things that as he was watching, he's processing it. He's seeing Lawrence do things that Minshew, he's like, I know Gardner Minshew can't do that. And he's like, you're not going to see the level of success or what he's ready to be because it wasn't a completion, or because what in your mind it wasn't a successful play. I think that's an important conversation. And I think it's an important conversation because I think that's one that you have to have in the franchise. You sit there and you look at Trevor Lawrence and you say, if we put him out there now, everything may not necessarily be quantifiably successful from the standpoint of the eyeballs looking in. But is it quantifiably successful from our standpoint, what we're seeing? Remember, Peyton Manning, he threw a gazillion interceptions his rookie season with the Indianapolis Colts. I'm pretty sure he led the league in interceptions, if I'm correct, as a rookie. And so quantifiably, from the outside looking in, you're like, man, he was taking a lot of lumps that season. People probably forget that. But for the Colts, they saw the success they needed to see. They knew what their bar was, what their measure was. So I think for Urban Meyer, that's what it really comes down to for Trevor Lawrence. Can we put him out there? Can he be successful to the level we need him to be successful for his development and not necessarily for the stat sheet? If that's the case, you probably want to get this started right away. If you're afraid that it's going to be below that bar, because that's sometimes I think when some negativity can start to creep in, like let's go back to when Eli Manning started off in the league in New York. The initial phase of Eli Manning was so poor, people immediately piled onto him and were like, this guy is like, oh my God, this looks like this was a big mistake. Obviously it wasn't. So where do you fall between those two sort of measures? What's the negative line, and can you keep Trevor Lawrence above it?